I once asked a pastor, if Jesus was crucified on a Good Friday and raised on Easter Sunday, why does he tell us he will be in the grave 3 days and 3 nights? Now, apparently the pastor I asked had never considered the question and just made up an answer on the spot. He said, well, we count a partial day or a partial night as a whole one, so since Jesus died on Friday, we can count Thursday night and it all works out. But, I objected, Jesus wasn't dead on Thursday night. Well, the pastor grinned, patting me on the head like a child. I guess we'll just have to ask God when we get to heaven. If that answer leaves you unsatisfied, then welcome to my channel. I'm glad you're here. That answer also left me unsatisfied, and I began to doubt the events in question. The church clearly teaches a Good Friday to Easter Sunday sort of death and resurrection narrative. Jesus clearly said 3 days and 3 nights, and clearly only one of them is telling the truth. Hint, it's this guy. Now, most Christians fail to understand this because they fail to understand the Old Testament. Prepare for a shock. Jesus was not Methodist. He was not Baptist. Jesus was not Presbyterian or even Catholic. Jesus was Jewish. And as an observant Jew, Jesus kept the feasts of Israel as the law commanded him. Now, sometimes the scripture, speaking of a Jewish holiday, says, "It shall be for you a Sabbath." Other times, a certain day is commanded as a holy convocation on which you shall do no work. And what is a Sabbath? Well, in a sense, it is a holy convocation on a day in which work is forbidden. And so it would be very easy for common folks like you and me and Matthew and Mark and John and Luke to fall into the habit of calling any day on which work is forbidden a Sabbath. We can see an example of that in Exodus 12. This is the chapter which first tells us of the Passover, the 10th plague of Egypt, the death of the firstborn, that stuff. But verse 16 of that chapter says that during the 8-day Passover festival, there will be 2 days on which no work is to be done. While the scripture doesn't explicitly call those days a Sabbath, it would be very easy for the common parlance to do so, since they are very similar. Regardless, though, if you have any day on which you can do no work, you must prepare for that day. And so the day before it would be called the day of preparation. Now in Exodus 12, we see that the Passover happens on a fixed day of the month. That is, the Passover lamb is slaughtered at twilight on the 14th day of the Hebrew month of Nisan. What day of the week is that? Well, it depends on the year, but really it could be any day of the week. Think, for example, how your birthday sometimes falls on a Tuesday or a Friday or a Sunday or whatever, and the next year it's on a different day of the week. This is because your birthday is a fixed day of the month. One of my oldest and dearest friends, for example, was born on June 5th. In 2019, that's a Wednesday. In 2020, it will be a Friday. But we also have the weekly Sabbath to honor, and that always happens on Saturday. Now, just a quick side note here. Jewish days begin at sundown and continue until sundown the following day. So when I say Saturday is the Sabbath, I really mean that Friday evening at sundown to Saturday evening at sundown is the Sabbath. Now, armed with this information, that there can be multiple Sabbaths or Sabbath-like days in a week, we are prepared to look at John 19:14, part A, which reads, "Now it was the day of preparation of the Passover." The day of preparation happens before a Sabbath day. That is, it is the day that you prepare everything so that you don't have to work the following day. But also, these days of preparation occur before Sabbath-like days. Again, because work is forbidden on the following day. Now, since we have also done our preparation, we're ready to look at verses like John chapter 20, verse 1, which tells us that on the first day of the week, that is, the day after the Sabbath, Jesus was raised. If the church tells us that he was in the grave on Friday night and raised on Sunday morning, no matter how we play with the numbers, we cannot get 3 days and 3 nights in that span. But if the Friday of that week was a day of preparation, like John tells us here, and the Saturday of that week was the weekly Sabbath, as Moses commanded, then for 2 consecutive days the woman would not have been able to go anoint the body of Jesus. That means that Jesus could have been crucified on a Thursday and was in the grave at twilight, just before sunset, on Thursday. So he was in the grave Thursday night, Friday day, Friday night, Saturday day, Saturday night, and Sunday day when he arose, just as Scripture tells us in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 4. Not only does this appease the curious child in us, but it also lends confirmation to the truth of the Scriptures when we know the language, culture, history, and context in which they were written and occurred. And when you give this answer to a child, like I was in the introduction of this video, the child, which can count 1, 2, 3, will be satisfied. Peace be unto you.